Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Star Trek Picard is the TV show that takes a lot of assets from Star Trek and from the idea of Captain Picard, and it just throws them in a big blender and it turns out a kind of action thing that occasionally has a bit of homages back to the original show. And it's not great. Anyway, Episode 9, Et in Arcadia Ego, which is a line from Virgil, and might make sense by the end, starts up with a jaunty, happy space crew flying through a transwarp corridor, arriving at Soji's home planet. And then they get shot really bad by Chad Romulan's wee ship that's been following them, and it's not really clear who's got the upper hand, but then the whole Borg cube appears, and it looks kind of bad for Chad Romulan. But before things can get too crazy, some giant flower alien things chomp on all the ships, which is just a different kind of crazy, I suppose. And all of the flower things drag them onto the planet, and boom, everyone gets crash landed onto the surface, and the ships are all borked. And Picard finally admits to everybody he's got fatal space dementia. And yeah, they tend to decide to leave the ship, and they find the Borg ship's broken as well. And Picard goes in and gets a big hug from Elner, and then Seven does a big hero appearance, and they very briefly lament on Hugh's death before talking about something else. But Picard's gang needs to go off and meet up with Soji's lot, and they do. And it's literally the most Star Trek village I've ever seen, full of 90s TV sci-fi dress robot people, and some more data-like than others. And they seem to be led by a scornful Ice Queen robot lass who looks an awful lot like Soji. And then Brent Spiner turns up as the son of the guy who invented Data, and he's all happy to meet them, especially Agnes, because she's like a robot brain scientist and he's like a robot body scientist, so they're kind of a match made in heaven. And then evil Soji, because she just knows she is, does a mind meld on Agnes, and it turns out that the crazy psychic message that makes people mad actually only does that because it's not designed for human brains at all. It's designed for robot brains. And it basically tells them exactly what we already know, that there's a race of super robots waiting off somewhere beyond the galaxy for a signal that tells them that there's some kind of proper sentient robot life out there, so that they can basically come in and wipe out all the non-robot organic life forms. Great. Liberation from human bondage. That sounds like another show that's on TV at the moment. Anyway, evil Soji's like, that's cool, and everyone else is like, that's not so good. And then Chad Romulan gets dragged in, and he gets locked up and has a tiff with Soji, and says that he actually loves her or something, but she's in a bad mood with him. And then evil Soji comes in and says, do you want to get away? And he's like, okay, so he does a murder on this other lassie, and then gets her dead from a brooch to the eye. And then he flails off into the distance. And evil Soji says, oh look, he killed someone, organics are bad, so we should clearly use the super robot message and wipe out them all, because somebody killed somebody, and that makes total sense, and Romulans are coming. And Picard makes an impassioned speech pointing out that that's absolute nonsense and they can all just escape on his ship. And everyone's like, no, because old meat data says that it's a good idea. Okay, so they lock up Picard and not Agnes because she's good at robot brains, and the Romulans are still on the way. Total cliffhanger. So what did I think? Well, I think this was actually the most classic TNG-style episode of Star Trek I've seen in many, many years. No, really. I mean, think about it. So much of Star Trek is basically somebody crashes on a planet or gets stranded and they can't escape. They find an idyllic village full of random people. It's perpetually sunny. People wear all kinds of weird day-glow clothes, and everyone's kind of attractive, but they all have a slightly odd side to them or slightly odd side to the society. And there's usually a mad scientist or some other leader who seems reasonable up to a point and then is a bit strange. And they always want to do something slightly weird, and the heroes get thrown in jail and total peril. So yeah, literally, this is a total classic homage to Star Trek in that sort of way. And it was also really, really good to see Brent Spiner, and him also getting to play someone that wasn't Data. And I quite like the fact that Dr. Noonien Soon Sung was actually kind of also an inventor and a bit of a nutcase, maybe not quite right. And, it looked nice. So, I mean, whatever investor or producer's summer home they shot this at clearly has a lovely house. But, yeah. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear indeed. I mean, where to begin with all this nonsense? I mean, let's start right at the very start and some of the really weird editing choices, like how 3 times in the first 10 minutes a scene would have clear cuts to every single character face, one after each other. I mean, this is a kid's show or amateur hour or something. It's baby's first editing shot. Now, it's also a little bit like that weird bit that was in Little Women where they did it, obviously in post as a digital zoom.
This is Meg, Amy, Beth, and Joe.
And that was quite funky because it was just a bit of fun, but it was really obvious because the film grain changed completely. Here it's just clunky as hell. I mean, we know who's on the ship. We don't need to see every single character's face. I mean, that's it's a total no-no in editing, and it's time wasting. And there needed to be time wasting. But then there was also stuff how come someone psychically took over Picard and he started talking, and they just never mentioned it again at any point. And then out of nowhere, like he's suddenly like, oh, space dementia's a thing, so he's going to have to talk about it to several people, and it's going to be a big thing for like the first 20 minutes. Why? Because we've got nothing else to write about. And even though it's never been mentioned since the pilot, now suddenly it's, oh, you'll probably die soon, which is a bit of a jump because, I mean, I'm sure before it wasn't about him dying soon, it was about him losing his mind. I mean, talk about enforced sadness and like crowbarring in emotion. I mean, especially the bit with the I love you, Raffi section. Because nobody loves Raffi. I mean, why is this here? Nobody loves Raffi who's watching the show. Everyone thinks she's terrible because they've done nothing good with her character. I mean, clearly, the people who wrote the show love Raffi. I mean, it reminds me of when Clara was on Doctor Who, and you could tell that Moffat absolutely loved Clara because absolutely every other character on the show was always going on about how amazing she was and how awesome she was, even the Doctor. Because what crap writing dictates that you don't actually need to show a character being awesome if everyone keeps telling them they're awesome. Because remember, telling is better than showing if you're an idiot. Now, Picard apparently loves Raffi platonically, and I actually wouldn't have minded if there was actually any setup for this at any point during the show, but there hasn't been. She's been annoying and snooty, and they've never established their relationship. And I don't want to buy a crappy comic that's a prelude to the show to have to watch it to understand why these characters like each other. Because there wasn't enough time given to the relationship to build that up, and it all just came off as completely cheap, naff, and silly, like everything else in this episode. Also, this week we're just shortcutting things. I mean, oh look, the Borg cube knows where they are. Why? Borg magic or something. Don't ask too deeply or think about it. Oh look, space flowers. How do they work? How do they do anything? I mean, why are they even there? Why did they invent them? Oh, don't ask, okay? Don't think about it. And they only have 10 now. They used to have 15, but now there's 250 Romulans coming. Why is there 250 Romulans coming? I don't know. Don't ask. Don't think about it. I mean, in the olden days, how come 3 ships used to be enough? Like 3 big ships. Now they have to have hundreds of wee ones. I mean, that makes sense. That's how, future stuff works. Again, don't ask. And I don't know why even they do these things. I mean, I presume that they want to have some big, flashy, explosive ending because they're afraid that ADHD might set in and people might change channel. I mean, fat chance anybody like that has already not changed the channel because this show is so boring as hell most of the time. And I don't even mind stuff like Soong being nuts and wanting to save robots over saving humanity, even though it's insane. Whatever, maybe he's batshit insane. But then, why are we clearly creating a Picard robot body for later? Because, right, I'm calling it now, that's what that's going to be. And do you know why I know it's going to be that? Because it's exactly the same thing they did in X-Men 3, where they had a brain-dead guy who was actually Professor X's twin, and they establish in a scene that he exists early on in the show so that during the end credits, after Prof X has been blown up with exploding magic, he can have transferred his consciousness through to his brain-dead twin's body. Now, frankly, I'm at the point where I just expect them to rip off things shamelessly now because they keep doing it, and then they fill in the gaps with fan service and terrible dialogue. I mean, they've got things that people do like they'll be like, oh, here's a returning actor, or here's a reference to something from the show, like Data's cat, because whatever, it's just whatever we get that actually makes people go, I remember that, the whole member berries thing, yeah. And I think it gets people through the tedious dialogue. Literally high school play levels of scripting and stuff like that and this and logic and terrible concepts and awful scenes. I had such great hopes for this show. I mean, now I just wish it wasn't so obvious and so dull. Now, what's more, I mean, this was another week where next to nothing happened. I mean, you could literally write the plot of this episode on a napkin. It was that sparse. Not even a napkin. You could write it on a tissue if you had such a thing lying around, if it wasn't being used by everybody for coronavirus instead of toilet paper because everyone bought them all. I mean, honestly, it's great for me because it means this is a short week. I can edit this up really quickly. But it's bad for TV watchers who are expecting something good to come out of this show. Another thing I'd just like to say before we finish on a slightly different note is that I've actually started to review the show Westworld, starting with the new season, season 3. But unfortunately, they've started copyright claiming all the videos, which means even if you're a subscriber, they're not going to appear on your subscriptions. So the only way to find them is actually through the direct link. So what I'll do is I'm going to put that in the description at the bottom. I'll put up a little box at the end that you can click on, and it would actually really help me out if you watch that. And yeah, obviously share it. And at this time, obviously everybody's got a little less money and everyone's a little worried about what's going on because of work not happening and stuff because of the coronavirus. So I don't expect anybody to actually drop me any money, but it actually helps me out a lot. If all you do is you share the video, you like it, you subscribe, all that kind of stuff. It helps get it out there and it helps me actually do this a bit better. But yeah, stay safe, stay well, and until next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.